Again. Fields to the end zone. Moore. Touchdown.
With time, throws it short. Foreman with the catch. Foreman to the end zone for the touchdown. Warriors' long pass of the day is 15 yards, and it's intercepted. Picked off by Jalen Johnson. Johnson untouched for the touchdown.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back. It's been feels like an eternity since the Bears have played after the bye week, but it's a good little rest, time to get away. Not focus and stress so much about the Bears. But it's been a nice little break. Welcome into the show. If you would, please like the video, follow the Barroom Network, and subscribe to them on YouTube. Should be a great show today. There's no shortage of things to talk about with the Bears, even though they have been on bye.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty to talk about. I mean, there's things going on with, obviously you guys are, I'm sure, going to want to talk about quarterback situation. There's the upcoming game again with Detroit at home this time. Elements are likely going to play a factor this time, and amongst other things. I mean, just, the Bears are in a unique situation right now with where they're at draft position wise. I mean, the Steelers did us another favor last night. So here we go. And it might be looking like 2 years in a row with number one. We'll see where it goes from this point on. But, we got a handful of weeks here to see how the season finishes out and make a full season's review. And then we'll go from there. But outside of that, I mean, that's a lot.
And it's kind of funny. Like, what are the odds that the 2 years we may get bounced into the first round pick again? It's two former Bears. Lovie Smith last year winning that playoff game, and this year Mitchell Trubisky with the just playing like he did in Chicago. Really, actually, honestly, he's been worse in Pittsburgh than he was in Chicago, I feel like. But what a way for him to gift the Bears. So after the field performance that he used to give us, at least now he's given something back to the city of Chicago. So great stuff there. So we're going to go in. We've got a guest coming on. I'm going to let Jeff take the reins here and introduce our guest, but you'll be really excited to see him on here. So go ahead, Jeff.
And before I introduce him, I want to just mention real quick, guys, I'm going to please ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like Tim said, give us a follow on Twitter also. I'm at JAW0235, like Jaw, JAW0235. And Tim is at Tim Willis 24, providing good content during games and otherwise, guys. So please give us a follow. And like I said, please like the video. So without further ado, let's bring him on. So the young man we're bringing on today covers recruiting for Notre Dame football for Inside Notre Dame Sports on Rivals Network. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Rivals. Rivals is a big national recruiting database, as you all know. So this is Charleston Bowles. If you guys want to give Charleston a follow, he's at CBowles01. Charleston, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks out here?
Hey, Jeff, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, everybody, my name is Charleston Bowles. I'm in my first year covering Notre Dame football recruiting for Inside Notre Dame Sports on Rivals. And just a pleasure to be on with you guys. Very grateful for the invitation and excited to talk, Notre Dame recruiting, a little bit of Chicago Bears and NFL talk, and just kind of cross over between the two and talk about more stuff. So very pleasure to be on and thankful for the invitation.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you being on. We had Mike Berardino on a few weeks ago, who covers Notre Dame as well. So, and like Jeff has said before, we're huge Notre Dame fans, grew up in South Bend. I want to ask you something kind of off subject here, Charleston. Have you heard the name Deshaun Kaiser?
Yes, I have.
So
that was actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first Notre Dame game I attended was back in 2016, the 4-8 season. They were playing Nevada, and Deshaun was the quarterback. So that was kind of my first game inside Notre Dame Stadium. So, yeah, very familiar with Deshaun Kaiser.
Well, I ask because it's funny because he played for Notre Dame and you're covering Notre Dame, but has anybody ever told you kind of a slight, almost uncanny resemblance to Deshaun Kaiser? Have you ever heard that before?
No, actually, I've never got that. I can kind of see it now with kind of the way my hair looks right now. I can kind of see the resemblance. So that's the first I've heard of it, but I can definitely kind of see the similarities between us.
Right.
So I remember that Nevada game. That's like Colin Kaepernick's coming out party to Notre Dame. That's the first time we all really heard of him. So, yeah, I remember that game for sure.
Who was it? Mark May that said that Nevada was going to win and Notre Dame won 35-0.
I don't remember now, but
that's pretty funny.
Anyways, so why don't you ask Charleston a question here, Tim?
So I want to first ask you, Charleston, before we get into some recruits, what's going on at Notre Dame right now? You know, with the dismissal of Chancey Stuckey and the wide receivers that are following suit, we've been able to keep some of the recruits coming in, but we've lost a few in-house already. And there hasn't really been a reason that's been broadcast to us yet of why Chancey was dismissed. But I didn't know if you had any maybe information that you'd share or what do you think is going on over there?
Of course. So we got to talk to Marcus on Monday, the day after kind of the Sun Bowl was announced. And we got to talk to him over Zoom. And he just kind of said, he was evaluating the wide receivers, the position, the group, the performance of the group this season. And he thought it was best to go in another direction. And he was very grateful of Coach Stuckey and what he did for the room. But I think with Notre Dame and kind of the new age of college football, I think right now with what's going on, that's just what you can probably expect now with, the transfer portal, NIL. As soon as the season ends, it feels like everything kind of goes full line ahead. So I think with the players that were leaving and the dismissal of Coach Stuckey, I just think you can expect that in today's age of college football. And I do think the program is going in a good direction under Coach Freeman. The roster turnover, I think, is just what you have to expect now with the day and age of the transfer portal and players coming for 1 year and they can leave. And I think with the wide receivers leaving, I just think that was Coach Stuckey. The wide receivers like Rico Flores Jr., for example, Coach Stuckey was his guy. So when he sees Coach Stuckey is dismissed, he's going to go out and test the waters and see if, he can find a home that he likes elsewhere now with Coach Stuckey gone.
That kind of brings me to a question I want to ask you, Charleston. There's a couple receivers in this upcoming recruiting class that Notre Dame has that kind of stand out to me. The first one is a local product I want to mention, but local to me anyways. I'm on the central coast of California, and there's a kid that's committed to Notre Dame named Logan Saldate, and he goes to Palma High School in Salinas, which is about 2 hours from me or so. So I want to ask you about him, and then the other receiver I want to ask about is local to Chicago fans, a kid from Glenbrook South named Cam Williams, Glenbard South, I'm sorry. He's a 4-star receiver, and he's a 6.0 rating, I believe. So he's pretty like borderline 5-star, if I'm not mistaken, 6'2", 184, explosive by all counts. So I want to ask you about those guys.
Of course. I'll start with Logan, and this can be said with Cam too. Two high character kids. Every time I've gotten to speak with them, they're just really high character, come across as really genuine people. And I think, with Notre Dame football recruiting, that's one of the top priorities when they look at recruiters. Can they fit in the culture? Can they fit into what Notre Dame wants to be on and off the field? And I think both Logan and Cam kind of embody what Coach Freeman and his staff want in players. And first starting off with Logan, I know he has a state championship game this Saturday. He's had a really strong senior season. He kind of got on my radar in July when he kind of noise started to come around him flipping to Notre Dame from Oregon State. And Logan's just a really good football player. I think, he's not the tallest, but he gets the job done. I think, Coach Stuckey initially recruited him and, he had his in-home visit with Coach Freeman and Director of Recruiting Chad Bowden last night. So, he's 100% locked in. And I think, what Notre Dame saw with Logan is just a really good football player that can, he's very fast, first of all, a very good route runner for his stage and his development stage. And I think he can be a contributor that, people might not assume right away. But I think he can come in and kind of contribute to Notre Dame, maybe in that slot role that, we saw Chris Tyree and Jordan Faison contribute at this season. And then get into Cam. Yeah, he's right there on the 5-star status. I got to go up and shoot a game of his and have a really good sit-down conversation with him in October. And starting off with Cam, just a really high-character kid, an athletic freak. I know he set several program records at Glenbard South this season. And he's another guy who's a track athlete, used to play basketball. Basketball was actually his first love. So he's a 3-sport athlete, and he'll be enrolling at Notre Dame in January. And he's, after CJ Carr, he's the second longest tenured kind of commitment in this class. And he's very outspoken about, the class chemistry and how all the recruits kind of galvanize with each other on visits and through text messages. And he's a guy who can definitely be a day one contributor. I know when I spoke with him, that's his expectation, is to play. And he kind of sat back and watched Rico Flores and Jaden Greathouse played this season. And, I think that's a goal of his that he really has, set that, he wants to be a player for Notre Dame right away.
Yeah. And I really liked what those two brought to the offense as true freshmen. It was very impressive to see that. And Jaden kind of started off the year as the hot hand. And then as the season went on, Jaden had the injury. And then you really started seeing Rico come out and show what he can do. And I loved seeing that, because I feel like that's one thing Notre Dame hasn't had in a few years, is that one dominant wide receiver. Always had great tight ends, and all those guys are usually pretty dominant, but we haven't had that big time dominant wide receiver in a few years. So that was a good sign to see that. I'm actually quite salty that Rico Flores left, but those, like you said, it seems to be part of the transfer portal on this NIL stuff. But so that kind of walks me into a question similarly. So with CJ Carr coming in the door here in December, early enrollee, barring like a major transfer of, like, say, Riley Leonard or one of those guys like that, do you think CJ Carr could potentially come in and start? Because I feel like of all of them, he probably could have the most talent walking in.
Yes, I do think CJ probably, has the highest upside in that room if, it stays the same. And you have Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ, even though, Coach Freeman has, been pretty adamant that they want to add a fourth scholarship. Mm-hmm. And like you said, Riley Leonard could be that guy. But I think starting CJ as a freshman, I would be a little bit hesitant personally because of kind of the roster that they've constructed. And I know, of course, this morning losing Blake Fisher, and we'll see who else kind of declares early. But I think with next season opening up at Texas A&M, I think that would be kind of a tough spot to insert a true freshman, in my opinion. But I do think CJ has the highest upside in that room, just from a recruiting kind of aspect of seeing what he did at the high school level in comparison to Minchie and Angeli. But what I saw from Angeli this season, I did like. Maybe him in 2024, he'd probably be a little bit more prepared than CJ. But I do think with CJ being an early enrollee, having that bowl prep under him, and then having spring practice, I do think he can push Angeli or whoever the starter is as much as he wants, just because of the type of player he is and the type of kind of commitment that the coaching staff is getting from CJ.
Yeah, I'm going to let Jeff take a question here in a second for you, but there's a comment that I wanted to repeat that over here that's on the chat. Jay Grizz says Notre Dame needs to start developing quarterbacks and not stay stuck in the transfer portal looking for QBs to fill in for 1 year. And that goes a lot along with what you're saying right now. And I kind of emphasized that a couple years ago when they brought Cohen in, which, worked out fairly well for Notre Dame. He played pretty well. And, Sam Hartman was supposed to be like the guy that was going to finally bring the national title to Notre Dame. Big, guy who's had a ton of success at the college level and comes in here and, for whatever reason didn't work out. But it's funny that, as you're talking about that, I saw that, and it makes a lot of sense. And I kind of tend to agree with that. So, yeah, but hopefully, whether it's Angeli or Minchie or Carr, one of these guys can step in, or even if it is the transfer quarterback, and really, maybe bring that national title here in the future, because the team is well constructed, in my opinion.
Well, let me just ask you about that then, since you're kind of getting into quarterbacks here, Tim. We got CJ Carr coming in, and then in a couple classes, they've got Deuce Knight coming in, who's by all accounts a very, very, very high profile kid, very highly rated. I'm not sure if they've got too many 5 stars out for that class yet, but he I would assume is probably going to approach that. So my question then is, who are some of the upcoming talents coming into Notre Dame? Who are those athletic freaks? And are those two guys, are Deuce Knight or CJ Carr, should we anticipate them being the starters of the future, barring whatever happens this year?
Yeah, I think starting off with the two guys you named, CJ and Deuce, I think at the quarterback position, that's as good as it gets. Notre Dame, in my opinion, has done a really good job at recruiting that position and getting CJ in committed early in the 24 class, and then kind of prioritizing Deuce Knight this summer, and then getting that commitment before the Ohio State game. I think that was huge. And Deuce Knight's an athletic freak. I mean, he's another guy who plays basketball and can jump out the gym, and you see it on the football field and the way he moves and the way he can make plays in the pocket and outside the pocket. And a couple other kind of athletic guys that I like in the upcoming classes. I think you start at the running back position. I think Coach Dealin has done a really good job recruiting that position. And I think you go to Missouri and look at the 24 class, the commit Aeneas Williams. He had a really strong senior season, and he's very powerful for his size, and he plays that way when you turn on the tape. And I think he's an athletic freak who's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the pass protection game. And he's another guy who runs with a toughness and a speed and determination that I'm really a fan of. And then I think you flip to the defensive side and you're kind of looking for freaks. I think it's, in my opinion, really easy to look at the 24 class and looking at a linebacker, KVA, Kingston Villamu-Asa from California, expected to enroll early at Notre Dame in January. I think when you kind of look at what you want in a linebacker in today's game, he's everything you want. He can rush the passer, he can play the run, he can go outside, guard the tight end, maybe even guard the slot receiver. He's just very overall kind of sound player. And I think I know he put up big numbers on the bench press back in the spring, and I know once he gets kind of inside Notre Dame's weightlifting program and kind of their athletic training, I think he's going to take off for sure. And that's a guy who could play as a freshman for sure, just because of his athletic background and just kind of the physical nature he possesses.
That kind of reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about also, and I don't mean to take one from you here, Tim, but I do want to mention it because the reason I asked you it all in the first place is because the Bears are the kind of team who really, when they go drafting players, they especially this regime, they're very they have a tendency to look for those guys with traits, the athletic ability, the explosiveness, the length, the size, the strength, all those things. So when I ask you about like the freaks, it's kind of part of the reason I asked is because I'm looking for guys who in the future could potentially be targets for the Bears. So that does bring me to KVA, the guy you just mentioned. And I believe his name is, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was now, but there's a guy I was reading about who has Notre Dame ranked as the number 2 linebacking class in this coming up class here.
Adam Gordon.
Yes. And he mentioned, KVA was the first one, but he also mentioned another guy. Let me see if I can find it here. I had it written down. Bodie Cahoon. So I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but can you talk about that class a little bit? What's so intriguing about them? Is it like the athletic traits, or what is it exactly that makes them such a highly recruited linebacker class?
Yeah, for sure. I think with looking at linebackers in Notre Dame, I think this one is when you really trust, Coach Freeman and defensive coordinator Al Golden and defensive assistant Max Bullough. Their kind of evaluation because, Freeman and Bullough played the position at a high level in college. And I think, with this linebacker class, kind of how I alluded to earlier, KVA can kind of do everything on the defense, from playing inside linebacker to playing outside to rushing the passer off the end. And then Bodie Cahoon, he's a tackling machine. I mean, his senior season, he had 200 plus tackles, and he's a guy who was committed to Ohio State for lacrosse and actually played safety earlier in his high school career. But kind of once his football recruiting kind of took off, he moved down to linebacker, and Notre Dame really likes his upside at the position. And He's a guy who, will benefit from the Notre Dame strength and conditioning program. But I think he's another guy like KBA who can just do a little bit of everything at the linebacker position and very versatile. And I think that's what Notre Dame's coaching staff is looking for with him, with KBA, and then with Teddy Rizak from Nebraska, who will be coming to Notre Dame as a two-time back-to-back state champ.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to say, Tim, before you go on with the question here, KVA is also relatively local to me. Also, he's St. John Bosco is in LA, I believe, or part of it, somewhere around LA, and that's probably about 3.5 hours or so from me. But so he was another guy that was pretty intriguing to me, and I'm sure he's going to be intriguing to Bears fans whenever he ends up being in the draft with his athletic potential and length and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, Charleston, I know we got to let you go here in a few minutes, but are you living in the South Bend area?
Yes, I live in Mishawaka.
That's where Jeff and I grew up. So, yeah, understand that well. So, I actually want to ask you a question about that. So, when we talked to Mike a few weeks ago, we asked him, like, what are your favorite pizza places in the area? And with him not being from the area, he was actually asking us, like, what we would recommend. But what's your favorite pizza place in town right now?
Yeah, so my family actually lives in Florida, and I've gotten this pizza place a lot when I go down there. And it was one of the first kind of pizza places I looked for when I moved up here last spring. But I just go with Hungry Howie's right now. That's kind of my go-to. But I'm very open to recommendations. You guys probably know the area a lot better than me, but Hungry Howie's is probably my go-to right now.
They haven't been there for that long in the area.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, because that there was a mall that was right around that area, Ironwood and Ireland there, and it had closed. And then Hungry Howie's came into that plaza right there. But yeah, I would say we talked to Mike, and we both recommended Starlight Pizza to him. That's a must-have if you're in the area. But we also have what? Yeah, Ireland.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and we have a family friend who's been with our family forever. She was actually dating a relative of our family for years, and she owns Luigi's Pizza, and that's another one that's like, it's a Mishawaka must-have. It's right there on Mishawaka Avenue, but it's actually a South Bend address. That's one you got to have too. That's a great pizza place. These are all like tavern style pizza, but they're really good.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. I'll definitely and I'll bring my parents up and we'll try it out for sure. Yeah, because my parents are in Indy, so
Starlight,
for sure.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say one more thing before you go. So I noticed on your profile there that you went to Ball State. Our sister went to Ball State. I mean, I broke out my Ball State shirt, and so there's I know that David Letterman went there and everything like that. So just would you mind telling like the local viewers here who don't know a ton about Ball State, just maybe a little bit about your experience there and what was so appealing to you about the school?
Of course, yeah. And Jeff, I love the shirt selection for tonight. Definitely a big fan of Ball State gear. But Ball State was really attractive for me once I kind of decided not to pursue college athletics. I really wanted to kind of stay in the athletic world. And I think Ball State had a really good journalism program that I had some family friends have connections in there. And they just told me go in with an open mind and see what you can do. And I just kind of volunteer in whatever you can get into. So I got to Ball State, and my first year was COVID. COVID happened, but then my second year, I kind of really took off in the daily newspaper up there, and kind of got my feet wet in the sports section, and went to starting. My first thing was covering men's tennis, and then I got to women's basketball, and eventually I worked my way up to football. And it was a really, really fun time covering Ball State. For those who don't know, they're in the MAC, which is kind of a lot of schools grouped in the Midwest. Who aren't Power 5 but Group of 5, and it's just a really fun conference to cover. A lot of pros actually come from that conference, and it was just a really good time. And I think for me, the biggest thing I took away from Ball State was just being able to adapt to different situations. I know as a young student journalist, a lot of our stuff was doing stuff over Zoom and stuff virtually due to COVID, and that's kind of how I really fell in love with just telling stories of athletes and coaches and fans, and just kind of, bringing football and basketball and soccer coverage and everything else to the student body.
Yeah, so I live in Terre Haute, so I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but it's only about 2 hours away from Muncie. So yeah, I've made that trip several times to go see my sister out there. So it's a really nice campus, and they had a really nice graduation ceremony. So yeah, that's really cool that you went to Ball State, and that's a pretty good campus there. So, but thanks, Charleston, for joining us. We appreciate the insight, and we appreciate anytime we can have somebody on, especially if we want to talk Notre Dame football. So appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on, and that gives us a lot of prospects to look forward to in the next few years here.
Thank you for the kind words, Tim, and thank you, Jeff and Tim, and very excited to keep following you guys and following all the Chicago Bears and Notre Dame football coverage.
We'd love to have you on again in the future. Guys, give Charleston a follow if you haven't already. He's great content for Notre Dame football and recruiting. He's at C Bowles, like Todd Bowles, BOWLES 01 at C Bowles 01. Give him a follow and check out all his content. Thanks a lot again, Charleston, for being on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Man, that was a really good conversation about some of those athletes that's coming in to Notre Dame in the next couple of years. And I really do think that a handful of those guys are going to be on the Bears' radar once draft season comes around. I have heard some talk that Kingston Viliamu Asa, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, but he's he just got recently upgraded to a 5-star player on Rivals, and he is Notre Dame's top recruit in his coming class. And he is, I mean, he could very well be a first-round pick is what they're saying about him. So this guy has huge potential, and he's an off-ball linebacker, but he can do it all from what's being said about him. So I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to see if he could potentially be a Bears target in the future too.
Well, I was going to say that I think that Charleston would be a really awesome guest to have on again closer to the NFL draft, especially seeing, scouting these players a little bit as they come in as recruits. But, and as the years go by, he's pretty new to the job. So like he's probably only seen a few kids that he's actually seen come up through the recruiting in Notre Dame. But, here in 3 or 4 years, he'll see these kids that he first started reporting on that are now getting to the NFL level, and he could probably get some really great insight on those guys. So he would be a really good guest around draft time. That's another guy we should bring back on in the future soon.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just want to give a shout out here to Joe real quick. He was one of the first guys that welcomed us in when we got into Barroom Network. And that's a really nice of you to say, always a great show, guys. Amazing addition to the network. It's very, very kind of you, Joe.
Too. Smart guy.
He's a Blink fan, like Tim said, Blink 182. But that's a very, very kind thing to say. And we love being here. We love the opportunity, and we love talking Bears with you guys. So I really appreciate that you say that. Well, I mean, without further ado, let's get into some Bears football here. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, like I told you guys the other day, last week, I don't really want to dig too much into this like whole quarterback thing with Justin and where everything's going and whether they're going to take a quarterback or not. I mean, yeah, that's obviously going to be a big topic of conversation for the next several weeks. We're potentially going to have the number 1 pick here and almost guaranteed going to have a top 2 pick. So with all that being said, I mean, there have been many people that have said, man, you can't run from that opportunity again. You have to jump on that. And there's other people that say, well, the way that Justin's been playing, and depending on how he plays the rest of the season with all that lumped together, and you look at the big picture, that may be enough to not go after a quarterback. To a lot of people, they look at it and say, are these guys in the draft, do they have any more upside, or are they going to be any better than Justin is in this system with this team, what we have going on here? And in the future, they are pretty set up well. But again, I don't really want to get into it a whole ton. But with that being said, I mean, guys, Justin has not been dealt a very nice hand for the last several years, the first 3 years of his career here. And really last year was just god-awful, the bear cupboard he was left with. And you can make arguments all day long about the play calling this year, alongside of the roster issues they've had, that they were unhealthy for an early chunk of the year. Arguably their best offensive lineman was hurt for the first 4 games. And look at the stabilizing presence he's brought. And we're talking about Tevin Jenkins, obviously, but and that's another thing I want to bring up too, before I swing it over to you, Tim, with whatever you want to say. But there was an article that Kevin Fishbane wrote on The Athletic, And you guys need to go check that out because he brought in Kyle Long, and they were going over some tape together. Some of the offensive linemen, they were going over Jenkins and Wright, and there was a handful of plays they went over. And it was really, really, really good. The things they were talking about, Kyle was discussing how good Wright has been for a rookie, and the plays and the things he's able to do in the play. And like I said, I don't want to get into it with you guys because it's more important for you guys to go check out the story yourself. But it's very good. You need to go look at it because it gives you an in-depth look at what these guys are really capable of. And one thing that they discussed in it that I've been kind of talking about recently is with Tevin Jenkins. This dude is always he's always looking for work. That touchdown pass that Justin threw against Detroit in the first game down the field to DJ Moore. Many of you have talked about it, noticed it already. Jenkins is initially on a different defender, and then right as Justin's getting ready to step up into the pocket and throw, there's a rusher coming at him, and Jenkins just gets enough of this guy to push him out of the way and give Fields enough time to get the ball down the field. There's another instance on the article that Fishbane did with Kyle Long, where they're showing a play. And I don't want to get into the whole play, but at the beginning of the play, his assignment is to get on one guy, and he sees that the guy is on the ground. So he goes to take on another defender. But as soon as he takes on the other guy, he looks over within a handful of a split second later to make sure that guy who was on the ground is still he's still accounted for. He's still not a problem. So he's looking for work immediately as soon as he's taken on that other block. He's looking to make sure that his quarterback is protected. That is, to me, an intangible that you cannot coach. That's a guy who is looking to be his best and looking to do the other things, the dirty work that goes unnoticed. But some of us do notice those things. And that's why we've been telling you guys since day one, we're huge Tevin Jenkins fans because of the things he's able to do on the field and the fact that he's just growing and growing and growing as a player.
Yeah, and I want to get in that too. And it's kind of, when you look at it in totality, so I am of the mindset to build this similar to what Philly did and similar to what San Francisco did, Dallas, teams that built in the trenches first and then supplanted their quarterback afterwards. Because if you would have asked San Francisco fans if they thought Brock Purdy was going to come in and be the franchise quarterback, they probably would have told you no. But
the third string.
Right. But because they have so many weapons and a great offensive line and a great defense, a guy like him can come in there and have instant success. Similar to Philly. They were, when Philly traded for A.J. Brown and drafted Devontae Smith, they were a receiver away. And then they had with Jalen Hurts, it's those are the things that I feel like that's how you really build a roster. And there's not very many situations where teams draft a quarterback and then build the roster. Josh Allen in Buffalo is kind of a rare time for that to happen. And Burrow.
But to be fair, he already had Joe Mixon back there, who was a dominant running back for several years before Burrow even got there.
Well, and Buffalo had a pretty freaking good defense too. So, I mean, there were still things there. When Poles came into Chicago and gutted the roster originally, Fields had nothing last year. I mean, nothing. And the way the offense was being ran, we didn't see much of Darnell Mooney, and then he got hurt. Cole Kmet was still kind of coming up and running, but the offensive line was terrible. The defense was atrocious for most of the year. There wasn't a whole lot for improvement there. And I feel like if we follow that model that we're starting to see more often in the NFL, and I've been preaching this for years, and I feel like quarterbacks that are brought in from college are at a disservice and a disadvantage when they're drafted into these situations, because some of these guys, a prime example, I want to mention Notre Dame, Brady Quinn, who I thought if he would have been drafted in a good scenario, could have had a very successful NFL career. But he went to Cleveland, who has shown that they have zero ability to draft quarterbacks or rosters around them. And they're just now starting to get to the point where they're a pretty solid franchise built on their defense. But I felt like for years that the quarterbacks were not given a good opportunity in the NFL. And only the great superstar players were the ones that we were starting to see have success. So I've always been a fan of the model of build the trenches first, build your team, and then bring the quarterback in, which kind of, it brought me to, there was a question on here. See if I can find it. It was, they were talking about, and I'm kind of going a little bit off subject here, but they were talking about the press conference and when Herb Howard had asked Herb Howard asked Justin Fields about the situation and things how that was going for him and if he felt pressure to have good success this year to be the quarterback next year. And I'm a big fan of Herb Howard. I like Herb Howard a lot, but it's kind of, and Greg talked about this earlier on Gabriel Talks Football. I'm not a fan of putting a player or a coach for that matter in that situation. You're asking a guy about his future with an organization. All that's doing is if he gives anything, you're creating division between him and coach or him and GM, things of that nature. And that's only making things worse. I don't understand the narrative there. And let's face reality. It is coming from the media. That's where that narrative's coming from. It's not being talked about outside of the media about, Justin Fields' future. Now, fans, yes, but it's all being stirred up by the media. We haven't heard anything from Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus or even Luke Getsy, who tends to throw Justin under the bus, even if it is like subliminal things he's saying.
Oh, he totally threw him under the bus in the last press conference
yesterday. Yeah. And so, but to me, like, they're not actually coming out and saying, well, Justin has to do this for him to be our quarterback next year. None of those things are being discussed. And it's creating this narrative in this divide. And it gets Bears fans in an uproar, and I'm afraid what's going to happen is it's going to push Justin Fields away where he says, I don't want to play for this organization. I want to get traded away. And, we could go on and on and on and on and on about these things, especially when it comes to coaching. And honestly, the topic of every conversation when it comes to the Chicago Bears, it either starts, finishes, or the entire conversation is Justin Fields or the coaching. And I feel like, of course, this can continue on over and over with any conversation, but there are things that need to be discussed. And I feel like the things that the media are portraying are not fair to players or coaches. And I've not been a Luke Getsy supporter since day one, but at the same time, I don't like the idea of trying to divide him from Fields, because that's only going to create animosity and it's only going to make the situation worse. And they're not going to play well because of that.
Well, I'll say this. Okay. First of all, Fields answered the question fantastically.
Yes.
If there's a quarterback that can handle the adversity of being asked a question like that, it's Justin Fields. So let's all kind of remember that this is the Chicago market here. And regardless of who's asking those kinds of questions, they're going to get asked. So let's just remember that. And Aldo makes a good point here. The media's job is to get the information, stories, and dig for the answers. They're not hired to help the team win, other than Larry Mayer, which is kind of funny. They are hired to gather interesting stories. So, I mean, yes, he's absolutely right. I mean, so yeah, their job is, it's not exactly to stir the pot per se, but it is their job to find out what the F is going on, so to speak, to put it bluntly, so whether it be Mark Potash or Jason Leisure, whoever the guy is that's asking questions that sound to the folks out there listening that they might be a little too much or whatever kind of criticism they have of it, they are just doing their job at the end of the day. And you can have an opinion on that all you want, but they are doing what they're getting paid to do. So there are a couple topics. There's some things being thrown around here in the chat that I really want to get to, because it's all great stuff here. So the first one is something that Aldo says about the Eagles and being a model franchise for Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham being from there. And the reason I want to mention that in the first place is because of another conversation, another topic that was mentioned between Aldo and Torian earlier. And Torian mentioned, see if I can go back and find it here. He wonders if stories will begin to leak out which direction Poles is leaning now that the number one pick seems assured. And let me just say this, okay? First of all, so Aldo mentioned also so before I say anything, Aldo mentioned that that Poles has proven to have a solid infrastructure regarding those leaks. And if we hear anything, it's probably planted by an agent or a sports writer that writes fiction. Now, that being said, so I agree with that. So chances of things actually being leaked that are true are pretty actually rare, or pretty rare for the most part. But a lot of times there's smoke, and when there's smoke, there's fire. And they're like before the draft last year, there was a lot of smoke that the Panthers were making some good offers to the Bears. And look what turned out happening. They ended up making a deal with the Panthers. And the reason I say that is because later on, Torian mentioned after that he thinks that we're going to have this could play out to the draft, seeing what's going to happen with this team. And I'm going to say this: if it plays out to the draft, Torian, they're taking a quarterback. That's just all there is to it. Because Poles, in my opinion, if he's gonna stick with Justin and keep this thing going the way it is, he's gonna make that trade down before the draft happens, like he did last year. He's gonna want to get it set and in place and get an idea of who his guys in his bubble are that he can take, depending on how far he moves down. I think he's gonna want to get this done like as soon as possible if he's gonna move down. So if it does play out to the draft, there's a pretty good chance we're going to see a quarterback, in my opinion. Otherwise, I think he's going to make a trade beforehand to move down, which in my opinion, as of right now, if you asked me, I think they're starting to lean towards rolling with Fields and rolling with moving down or whatever with the draft and collecting more and more capital. And that's the whole point of the reason I said the whole thing about the Eagles and the way they've built it that Aldo mentioned earlier, and Cunningham being from there, because look what they've done. They built in the trenches first. They had Lane Johnson in place. They built this thing from the interior out. I'm sorry, from the trenches out. And then they went and got a playmaker in A.J. Brown to pair with their young quarterback in Jalen Hurts. They've got a solid running game. They've got a great defense. So, I mean, that's to me, the Bears are starting to lay that foundation already. They've got a great defense. They've got their bookend tackles in place. They've got two outstanding guards. They need a center. Their defensive line is starting to come together. They've got a really good edge rusher. They've got some promising interior rushers, especially Gervon Dexter. I'm sorry. He's getting like really, really good in my opinion. So they're starting to build this thing the right way. And to me, they don't have to take a quarterback early in the draft to continue to have success at this point. Justin is starting to show, especially lately, he can play good football. But again, the last 5 games, it's not going to be the be-all, tell-all like some people are saying, oh, you can't say that 5 games is enough to make this determination. It's not. But the next 5 games are a part of this overall equation that we have to take into account here, which there have been some great things that Justin has showed in his career here, guys, whether we want to admit it or not. So, in my opinion, and I agree with Torian, I'm cool with whatever direction Poles chooses, just ready to move forward and build a winning team that's competitive for years. I agree. If he decides to wait to the last minute and they draft a quarterback, I'm going to support that quarterback. I'm going to be upset that Justin's gone because I like Justin Fields as a player and I hope well for him. And if he goes to another franchise and he has success, I'm going to love that for him. But I'm going to support the quarterback that the Bears have and hope they build a consistent winner if that's what they decide to do. I just, in my honest opinion, believe that guy can still be Justin Fields.
So I'm going to go out and I'm just going to call it now. I don't think Justin's going anywhere. I think they're going to trade down from number 1. And this is why I say that. From a talent perspective alone, okay, some people could make the comparison and say maybe Caleb Williams, maybe Drake May. But I'll mention that Greg Gabriel is on the record saying that, even if he had the choice, he would take Justin over the other 2. So, and even with that, so assuming talent-wise, okay, so say they're more talented. But if Ryan Poles' draft classes or free agent signings are telling in any way, they show that talent and character are equal importance to him. And, watching, and especially in his press conferences, Justin Fields is model behavior for what you would hope for in your quarterback or any of your players. He answers questions, even the difficult ones. He doesn't shy away from them. He's honest, and he doesn't throw anybody under the bus. He takes responsibility and blame when he feels that he is responsible and at fault. Always has. whereas, Luke Getsy could take something from that. But at the same time, then you watch Caleb Williams and you see the kind of antics that he has in his press conferences and his play on the field. And I just don't see any scenario where Ryan Poles would take Caleb Williams over keeping Justin Fields. And I also say that because especially with the antics and the way that he reacts to things, again, we passed on Jalen Carter this last year, who could have been a generational player and was about as guaranteed coming out as you've seen. We don't know what Caleb Williams is going to be.
They passed on, well, to be fair, though, timeout. To be fair, the Bears passed on Jalen Carter for the same reason they passed on a guy like George Pickens. It was a character thing.
That's what I'm saying.
It wasn't because of the talent.
Correct.
And
no,
I don't think that Caleb Williams has bad character. I just think I'm just not sure that he's fit for the Chicago media.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. That's part of your character, though. Now, just because you don't have poor character as far as like what kind of things you're doing off the field, the antics are just as much a character trait to me as anything. The way he's acting in these press conferences, the way he reacts to teammates on the sidelines and coaches, those things, for one, like you said, he will get eaten alive in Chicago. And two, these coaches, they hold these players to a standard. I just don't see a scenario where Caleb Williams could play under that standard based on what I've seen so far. I don't know him personally, obviously. I'm not in the building at USC. I don't know those things. But from an outsider looking in, that is what's portrayed. And from what we've seen from Ryan Poles, he avoids anything like that. And that's what I was saying. With a generational talent like Jalen Carter, he still shied away because of character issues. And I don't think that the car wreck, the racing thing necessarily played the biggest factor. And I think just him coming into a pro day overweight and things like that, even after he was given the second chance, more or less, those types of things, I think, weigh more with Ryan Poles because of the man. And if you've heard Ryan Poles talk, he talks about Eberflus as the manliest man, like things like that's important to him as the manly character that they're bringing into this organization. And everyone that is on this roster has been exactly that. Someone that has incredible character, all of these players. And to mention, the one player that didn't have that kind of character got thrown out the door here a few months ago in Chase Claypool. So I don't see a scenario where that happens. I just don't. And and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Justin Fields lover or that I'm that big of a Justin Fields fan, which I am a huge Justin Fields fan. But to me, from building a team, that is how you do it, is building through the trenches, building it out, and then getting your quarterback. And I feel like even if Justin isn't the quarterback, shore up your roster with the picks that you have and build. And then you bring in your quarterback. Because as we saw with Tyson Bagent, who doesn't have nearly the physical traits that Justin Fields does, we still won 2 games with him. So it just goes to show, if you can build the roster and have a good game plan, you can win with quarterbacks as long as they're not turning the ball over a ton. I mean, we're seeing it right now with several teams.
Yeah, I just, I'll just say a couple of things before I do want to talk about the coaches. I want to get into into some stuff with the coaches here, but I don't know that I agree about the character thing to an extent, but I will say that it does seem that they do target players that have like this switch flipping mentality where they're just really, really good people off the field and they're good teammates and they work hard and they play hard, whistle to whistle. And, but when they are on the field, they're just like nasty pricks. I mean, to say it, I don't know what other word to use, but that's what they look for. It looks like they look for flip switching kind of players. And
Tevin Jenkins.
Yeah, like Tevin Jenkins. So to just put a point on Fields, I mean, he has shown an ability to be able to handle what the media throws at him. I mean, somebody might argue that because of the whole situation that he had earlier in the season where he said what he said about the coaches, and then he to backtrack and then invite everybody in and say, now I would never throw anybody under the bus. And I'm paraphrasing, but to be fair, he has always taken accountability for the most part. And the coaches really have not, okay? Especially, like I said, in this last press conference. That stuff that was going on with Getsy, basically saying, ultimately, I'm paraphrasing again, but he basically said, ultimately, Justin has the decision, the ultimate decision of what to do when the play comes to whatever. It's like, how can you say that? You're the play caller. You decide to play. And other people have said, before you go on, other people have said, because he made a comment also in the press conference that some of those weren't design screens, that they were checked into from Fields. And again, throwing Fields under the bus, saying, oh, Fields did that screen. It was on him. But if you ask other people who've been watching, it does not appear that way, that those were all like that. So many of those were checked into. It looks like most of them were called. So, that to me is just crazy. It's crazy that he would do that, throw his players under the bus like that, especially his leader. And I think it's what he's trying to do is he's trying to save his own ass right now. I think he's basically saying, hey, guys, this quarterback ain't working. Let me use that number 1 pick, and I'll show you what this offense can do. And I think everybody in Chicago's like, they're over it. We're done with it because we've seen it. We've seen that you're not willing to run an offense that's going to cater to your personnel, regardless of who's at the helm. So we're done with it. We don't want to see it anymore. And that kind of brings me to my next point about the head coach now.
Well, before you go, I want to add one thing to that. So Torian puts a comment on her. Seems like Kevin Warren is breathing on Getsy's neck, which I think there's a very good possibility that he is being, well, even Matt Eberflus, who in the past has always come to Getsy's defense, has not openly came out and said, hey, Getsy's doing this. He's not doing that. He's even saying we as coaches also need to be accountable. And we would like to see more down the field passing. We would like to see this. And what bothers me the most about, and
I've been saying that since he got the job, I want to see downfield passing.
Yes.
Justin's a good down the field passer. He has been saying it since he took the job, and they don't do it.
And that's the thing. It's like, and you can see that it's clearly not being called. But this is what bothers. So I had asked Greg Gabriel before the show. I posted on Twitter last night, and I was asking him because he was talking. We talked about the RPOs and how Getsy had said, we called those RPOs and they're either a run or the screen pass option, and Justin had the choice. Okay, regardless of whether that was Justin's decision or not, we didn't see hot reads, we didn't see slants, we didn't see any quick routes except for the screens. So regardless of whether or not that was Justin's decision to throw it or run or hand off, you didn't scheme anything other than a screen pass. So you having 15 screen
that was his only answer to the blitz. So how can you say, that was Justin checking into it? That's the only check he gave him.
He is a scapegoat. He's looking for ways to save his job and and he's trying to make it on field and put it on fields. And it's baffling to me, like the fact that he couldn't even just say, hey, maybe I shouldn't have called the screen that many times. Even, Justin had the option, but I probably should have schemed some different routes, different things. And every time somebody asks him about those things, every time he says, well, when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, it doesn't. No, it's because it's not working. It's not working. And you can say if it works, it works. And it doesn't. That's fine. You get praised if it works and you get criticized if it doesn't. But at the same time, if it's not working every single time you do these things, there's a problem with the call. There's a problem with how you're scheming a game plan. You can't keep saying when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, it's not good. You have to adjust as a coach. And it's clear that you don't have the ability to adjust outside of your own scheme and your own ways. It's just like with Nagy, and it's baffling to me. But at the same time, I feel like Luke Getsy's even more arrogant than Matt Nagy was about it. And I know I just kind of went on a tangent about this, but it's just unbelievable to me that this guy is still going to his press conferences, still with he's got the same moxie, the same cocky, arrogant attitude. I feel like he's calm when he talks, but at the same time, like I don't even know if it's just confidence. He just seems arrogant to me and thinking that it's not on him.
Well, I'll just say this, like I said already, I think to me, his grave has already been dug. I think it's pretty much predetermined. He's gone regardless. even if the offense could take like an entire turnaround in the last several games here, and I don't think it would, or last 5 games here, and I don't think it would make a difference. I think he's still pretty much out the door because it's like I said last week. I feel like the offense, the personnel can play in spite of what he's calling. They have their moments where they have good personnel. The blocking is good up front for the most part. Fields can deliver the football, whether people think he can or not. He's a dynamic runner. They have a good running game regardless outside of him. And they have dynamic weapons who catch football. Now, that kind of brings me to another point here. So Getsy, to me, like I said, is gone no matter what. And most of the offensive staff's probably gone with him. Now, that brings us to Flus now. So Greg has been mentioning on Gabriel Talks Football. If you guys don't watch that show already, you should be. If you're subscribed to Barroom Network, you got to check out GTF. It's a great show. Gabriel is a resident scout on the network here, and he definitely knows his stuff. So,
well, and I will say, if you want actual insight and how things really go, and what like honest evaluation of things, watch the show, because you hear all these different narratives in the media, and Greg just gives it to you straight up how it is.
Yeah. So that, like I was saying, so Greg thinks that Flus has to win 4 out of the next 5 games to retain his job. Me personally, I think he's got to win at least 3. I don't know if he's got to win 4, but I do think he has to win 3 to save his job. Now, that being said, even if the reason I even say that is because in the chats here, in the comments, there's a lot of people bringing up Mike Tomlin. And Tim and I talked about Mike Tomlin a couple weeks ago, and how I mentioned that there's been some talk in Pittsburgh that he could go, that they might want to get rid of him. And we were talking about how if it was us and they got rid of Tomlin in Pittsburgh, we'd be all aboard that. He better be here, signed, sealed, delivered kind of thing, that they shouldn't even think twice about it. It'd be like the whole, I hate the Cubs, but the whole Craig Counsell thing, bringing him in, it's not a matter of David Ross being a bad manager. Craig Counsell is just an upgrade. And let's say Omar
Tomlin not the GM when Mike was hired. So there's the
possibility. I was just going to say, even if Flus finishes out the season well, you see his culture he's building, you see he's doing things the right way, the team plays hard for him, they block for him, all these things, great. If Tomlin becomes available, that is an upgrade. To me, you take that. And there's been a couple things mentioned in the chat here also that most people are on board. Aldo mentions that the problem he has with Tomlin, and he loves him, is that he's allowed 2 diva wide receivers to be in there and to do their thing, and the first one, obviously, is Antonio Brown, and he was a massive problem after he took that hit from Vontaze Burfict. I think that messed his career up. I think it messed his brain up, and I think it messed his career up. And it's really sad to say that because the guy was just a phenomenal football player. And that was just, he's never been the same since then. But that was the first one, and then now you've got Pickens, who's doing the same. And honestly, Deontay Johnson's kind of a diva too. That's kind of what Pittsburgh does, is brings in these talented diva receivers because they come into an environment that they have a strong built culture, and they think that they can make it work there, that they can make it
the whole reason that Pickens that was the whole reason Pickens fell in the draft to begin with, was the character concern.
So I'll say this, if they were to bring Tomlin in, I don't think you're going to start seeing that right away. I don't think they're going to start bringing in guys like that right away, because Poles mentioned before, and I think they're still kind of like this roster is still young and impressionable. And if you bring in a guy like Jalen Carter, like they passed on, if you bring in guys in the future that can be like that, who act like that, or could potentially derail your team in some way or another as being as a distraction, I still think they're going to avoid that for a while until they get to a point where they have a built, established culture and a winning football organization like the Eagles do before they go after a guy like that. So I still think they're at the point where they're avoiding people like that. So you can bring in a guy like Tomlin with a guy like Poles, pair them together, and you kind of get the best of both worlds, in my opinion, because you have that stable leader, that guy who does nothing but win. As I mentioned to you guys the last time we talked about Tomlin, I think it was not this past podcast, but the one before that, the dude has never had a losing season in his career in Pittsburgh. Never had a losing career. We're talking about seasons when Roethlisberger has been hurt and not played a whole year. Kenny Pickett has been less than stellar, to be nice, this year. Trubisky was terrible in the last couple weeks he's played. Last year, the roster wasn't very good. They were terrible to start the year, and they finished out with a winning season. They finished 9-8 last year. This guy just wins everywhere he goes. So, to me, like I said, even if Flus were to have a fantastic finish this season, he wins 3 or more games, you know, maybe they even compete for if they end up in the playoffs somehow or some way. I don't think he's gone even with Tomlin available because he made the playoffs, but it's doubtful that's going to happen. So that being said,
after a playoff season,
that's different. That was a brand new regime. I just don't see that being the case again because this regime hired the coach that's in place right now. So my point is even if he were to have a great finish this season, they're likely not going to make the playoffs regardless. So he finishes the season well. Things are looking good. Tomlin becomes available. That's an upgrade you have to take.
Well, and, you know, the chat is talking about, you know, how he's allowed the diva wide receivers. You know, Chicago doesn't have that problem. Poles isn't drafting or signing guys like that. So, if you watch anything from the Steelers outside of those guys, there haven't been any other guys with character concerns. There haven't been. And you can see that Tomlin holds down the fort. And you can go as something as simple as they don't have the penalties because they're a well-disciplined football team. And that goes along with that. So I just don't, for me, like Jeff's saying, that's an ultimate upgrade, regardless of whether you like Flus or not. If Mike Tomlin's on, and I'm on record talking about this 2 years ago when Sean Payton was available. You know, he did the retirement thing and did the broadcasting, but I was on record that year saying that I wish that they would have brought Sean Payton in to be the head coach instead of Matt Eberflus. And, you know, to me at that point, it was worth giving up some compensation because of what you know you're getting as a coach, a proven head coach, a proven Super Bowl winning coach who not only knows how to run an offense, but also knows how to build an incredible staff. Dennis Allen is one of the best defensive minds in football. And he's now the head coach over there. He's, you know, I'm not sure that he's a good head coach, but he's an excellent defensive coach. You know, he has that ability. And, you know, early this year with Denver was really rocky, but they've really come on strong over the last, well, they've won 5 or 6 in a row now. Like they've really come on hot and he's revitalized Russell Wilson's career. So to me, you know, I'm of the mindset, you know, I always would prefer to bring in a experienced veteran coach to coach your team, especially if you haven't had the wins. You know, if you've got a winning culture, I wouldn't have an issue with bringing in, you know, a new inexperienced head coach that you know is a good coordinator that's on the rise. But as far as a team like this who hasn't had any semblance of success, especially continued success, bring in the veteran coach who has the pedigree and who's going to build the staff. And I keep seeing Jim Harbaugh. Please no. I don't really have anything in me that makes me feel like I would want Jim Harbaugh here. And I'm sorry, Bears fans, I don't see any chance that they would bring Jim Harbaugh here. I really don't think the McCaskies like him. And they definitely don't like those kind of antics. And yeah, they may not make the coaching decision, but I'm telling you right now, they'll have their hand in it if they say, hey, we're going to bring in Jim Harbaugh. They're like, yeah, no. So I don't see that scenario, and I don't really care to see that scenario. I would like to see if they are going to move on from Flus, somebody like Mike Tomlin. That would be like, you're talking an upgrade. Somebody who has been to the playoffs multiple times. Just my opinion.
I'll say this. So Harbaugh, I know there's a lot of fans that want Harbaugh because he's done nothing but win pretty much everywhere he's been. He just wins a ton. And I'll give you guys credit for that. But I'll say this, okay? I agree a lot with, and we talked about Greg earlier, Greg Gabriel and Greg on Gabriel Talks Football. I agree with Greg on his stance on Harbaugh. The reason I don't like him is because I just think he's goofy. He's this goofy crybaby on the sidelines who like whines if he doesn't get his way. He's a pretty good coach and his players love him for the most part, but it's like, there's a reason, guys, that he hasn't been in the NFL in several years because for whatever reason, he's soured his welcome there. And his camp every year puts out something about how they want, these teams want him and there's teams interested in him. And he's considering coming back. He wants to come back. Teams don't want him back. At least that's what's widely believed to be the case. So if anybody brings him in, there's been a couple of chatters that have said possibly the Chargers. I could see that just because the Chargers are sick of the shit that's been going on with them. And I could see him bringing in a guy like Harbaugh and like lay the hammer down. So I could see that happening. It would make sense to me. But as far as the Bears, I agree with Tim, and I don't think the McCaskies would go for that. And I just don't see Poles being on board with that for that matter. I don't see that being a route he would go.
Again, high character guy. That's what he's looking for. And, I wouldn't say that Harbaugh has poor character, but he clearly doesn't make good decisions all the time, especially when it comes to like violations and things like that. NFL teams aren't going to be too happy about those kinds of things. And I will guarantee you there will be some sort of investigation into that stuff if he were to be considered for a job. But
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I definitely think it would have to be any coach that they bring in, whether it be a new offensive coordinator or a new head coach, is going to have to be somebody who has experience, in my personal opinion. I mean, if they bring in a new head coach that doesn't have a lot of experience, it better be a guy who's respected around the league that can bring in respected assistants, because otherwise I don't think it's going to work out well, because we've seen this happen before time and time again. So now I will bring up one thing. There was an interesting conversation I heard this morning. I think it was on ESPN 1000. It was Tom Waddle was talking with somebody about how, well, if you do fire Getsy, who's going to want to come in and coach this team and be the offensive coordinator? He's got a point there. But to be fair, there's guys out there that they could bring in, experienced guys that they could bring in. Tim and I have mentioned in the past one of the guys we like. Greg loves him too, Pep Hamilton. Okay, he's a guy I believe if the Bears offered him next year, if he was available, he's a guy who could come in and he would be willing to be a coach.
I would pound the table for Pep Hamilton. I would absolutely pound the table for him.
Yeah, I like Pep Hamilton. I would be totally on board with that. Now, going back to Harbaugh, though, I will say, if for whatever inexplicable reason, all hell broke loose, something crazy happened and Jim Harbaugh did get hired by the Bears, I'd be on board with it, because like I've said to you guys before, that meant that for whatever reason, they had conviction in him. And the reason for it is because he wins a lot. So if that's what they do, I mean, I'd be okay with it because I would expect winning. But as soon as he doesn't show immediate winning in that first year, people are going to be calling for his head. So you guys, you say what, just be careful what you wish for, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So whatever the case may be, I don't know if I definitely wouldn't be, he would not be my first choice in Harbaugh is what I'm going to say, but no. I definitely think it would be somebody with experience. If Tomlin becomes available, he's at the top of the list. I do still think that, I'd be shocked if he was actually gone in Pittsburgh. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. I don't think he's going anywhere. I'd be surprised if he was gone, because Pittsburgh knows what they're doing, and the fans are the ones who want him gone, because Pittsburgh fans don't know what it's like to not have good coaches. They've had like 4 of them in the past 60 years. So, I don't see that happening. And to me, again, if Flus wins, I think he needs to win at least 3. And if he does, I think his job is probably safe based on what has been going on here.
Well, I want to mention something here. Joe is mentioning Eric Bieniemy. And I just want to say with that, there's a couple of reasons why I don't think there is a chance that Eric Bieniemy comes.
He's not going to come in and be a coordinator. It would have to be Flus getting fired and him being hired as head coach.
Right. So number one, I wouldn't be on board with that, because again, no proven track record as a head coach. And 2, we tried it with Nagy already, former Kansas City guy. Not saying that Kansas City coaches can't, Andy Reid guys can't coach, because they can. We've seen it many, many times. I'm just not certain. And for one, he didn't even call plays in Kansas City. I just don't. And besides the fact that he has no track record as a head coach, you're talking a brand new scheme coming in now too. And I think if I had to bet, I wouldn't see the Bears bringing in an OC that would have to completely change the offense. There are a lot of similarities to the West Coast Shanahan style offense. There are similarities, but you'd have to come in, bring in a new offense, and change everything. Whereas if you brought in a coach, you could say, I think either they're bringing in somebody that has experience with the Shanahan offense again, or again, someone like Pep Hamilton, or please God, Pep Hamilton, because they can come in and they can adjust their offense to the player skill set and the offense they're already running. Pep's not going to come in there and say, okay, you guys are running the Shanahan, we're going to run the West Coast, or you guys are running a version of a spread, we're going to run more of a pro style. it's not that type of thing. He's going to come in there and say, okay, this is what the offense does well, because think of it this way. This roster has been constructed for a zone read type offense. They're not going to come in here and they're not going to bring somebody in here who's going to completely change that. They're going to keep it similar. So exactly, the Andy Reid coaching tree in Chicago is a disease named Nagy Will. So yes, Aldo makes a great point. Like I like Andy Reid and he's a great coach. I don't want to see that experiment all over again. I just don't. Now, if you are talking, say he's had an OC over there in Kansas City who's been calling plays for the last 2 years and they've still had the really great success, that'd be one thing. But neither Nagy or Bieniemy had more than a few games combined as an offensive coordinator that called the offensive plays. Again, we're seeing it right now with Luke Getsy. Hadn't had experience calling plays. These guys don't, for one, they haven't had the experience, so they don't necessarily know what to do in certain situations, or they make bad decisions. Where guys have had the experience are going to know, hey, this is not going to work out in this situation here. Let's try something different instead. It's not rocket science for those guys, whereas it's more of a challenge for the guys who have not had the experience. And I, like I said, am more along the lines of bring someone in with experience, and I'm talking play calling and as an OC, if you can, preferably for a head coach that's had head coaching experience. And I'm not talking somebody who has been a head coach in the past and didn't have any success as a head coach. I'm talking guys like Mike Tomlin, like Dan Quinn, guys who have Super Bowl pedigrees. Jim Caldwell, and let's be fair to Jim Caldwell. He was great in Indianapolis, and then he was really bad in Indianapolis. And let's be fair, he had absolutely zero quarterback play, and they were clearly tanking that year that he was fired.
For Luck.
So
yeah, I mean, you can't put any of that on him. They wanted to go a different direction when Luck came in, so they tanked and he took the fall on it. So, that's kind of how it goes sometimes. And, so again, guys, like I said, the chances are, if Flus wins 3 games in the next 5, and the defense continues to play well like they have, and they continue to show strides, I think there's a good chance he sticks around. I do think that Getsy's fate is pretty much sealed. But that being said, I think we got a handful of questions here. We don't have much time left. We got to get out of here. So let's get these questions in before we go. Let's see what they had here. There's one. No. Erica asks, which twin would win a wrestling match, me or Tim? Well, let's just put it this way, okay? So when we were growing up and little and stuff, yeah, we kind of bounced back and forth. We each took some matches here and there. We actually wrestled all our lives growing up, if you guys didn't actually know. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit growing up. But once we got to high school, we went to different schools. And the wrestling program I went to in high school for the first 3 years before I transferred to Tim's school. So I went to 2 different high schools. And the first program I was at was a powerhouse in the state. Tim's was not. So when I went there, we were in a little bit of different situations. And I think Tim would probably admit that I was a little bit better than him at that time. But we did wrestle. Yeah, he's arguing it. Oh, he's actually
in certain areas. I didn't disagree.
All right. So anyways, so to make a long story short, Tim and I actually have wrestled a couple, as our cousin Jake is a 4-time All-American and national champion in wrestling in the NAIA level. And his team just loved the idea of having me and Tim wrestle actual refereed full-length matches against each other. And keep in mind, these matches are 7 minutes, guys. You're wrestling a 7-minute match, a grown man against his will, giving it all you've got for 7 minutes, okay? So needless to say, Tim and I were both dead by the end of both those matches that we wrestled. But guess who won both those matches? It'd be your boy.
By a technicality twice.
By technicality.
You won by a point.
That's a point both times. I still beat you. And it's because I was gassed at the end and stopped wrestling.
No, you didn't wrestle the whole time. You were gassed the whole time. You took 2 shots, you scored, and then you played
both times. That's all it counts. I got my takedowns, and I won the match. Hey, I might have played it safe towards the end, but it's because I was dead, not because I couldn't.
And
Anyways.
you had 10 pounds on me, so congratulations.
Yeah, maybe. But anyways.
It did.
So there's that.
Hey, but hey, in all fairness, for those of you listening, you know, he may have gotten the better hand when it comes to me, but guess who had the better career in wrestling? How about you ask Jeff
To be fair, again, though, like I said, I went to a powerhouse program for my first 3 years. Now it's behind some.
Oh, here come the excuses. I went to a powerhouse program.
Yeah. Anyways, that's fun. I still beat you, didn't I? Anyways, so it depends. Jake Griss says wrestling match depends on if it's mud or if it's Jello or soap. I don't know if I'd be wrestling Tim in mud or Jello if I'd have any interest in doing that, but I'm pretty confident I would take him in any kind of wrestling anywhere. So let's just put it that way.
Oh my gosh!
All right.
So here's the question right here.
Go ahead, Tim.
Ryan Poles. Kevin asks, Ryan Poles consistently makes the strategic, safe moves. He's keeping Fields and going to take another quarterback on top of it because it's safe and strategic, in my opinion. I halfway agree and I halfway disagree. I agree that he's safe and strategic and he's going to keep Justin Fields. I don't think he's taking another quarterback because you already have Tyson Bagent. That's your backup quarterback. Here's why I say it. If you're sticking with Justin Fields, you're saying you're basically admitting like he is your guy. And to me, there is a possibility that they could draft somebody in the later rounds that's a developmental projected quarterback. But at the same time, they did that last year when they picked up Tyson Bagent as a UDFA. And he, again, similar to Braxton Jones, exceeded expectations quickly. So to me, I'm of the essence where you have two quarterbacks who you now know for sure what they can give you, what their floor is, and they both have a pretty good ceiling. To me, I don't see another quarterback coming in. I see if they're not rolling with, or if they unless they draft one of those guys with the top pick, I don't see another quarterback going because I think they have what they like with Tyson Bagent as a backup, and he'll only be a second-year player.
Well, I'll just piggyback off that real quick. So I do think there's a good possibility that they could. So I'll disagree with you. I do think that they could draft a quarterback, even if they do keep Justin, which I do think they will at this point. That being said, I don't think if they draft a quarterback, that doesn't mean that they don't believe in Justin. It just means, well, you know, we believe in you, but this is our contingency plan here. We're going to draft our developmental guy. And I don't think they have to do it late. I think they could take one on day 2, maybe in round 3, you know, because they don't have a round 2 pick right now. But what if they take a guy in the 3rd round? I believe they have 2 third-round picks right now. You take a guy in the 3rd round, that's a developmental guy that you believe in. You know, just if things don't work out, that's a guy that you maybe becomes the guy in the future. So I don't think that it's without question. I don't think it's without possibility, I should say, I guess, that they could go that route and take a quarterback. I just don't personally think right now they're going to take one in like the first round. And they don't have a second rounder right now. And there were a couple of commenters that mentioned like Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy. I think both those guys are going in the first round. And I don't think the Bears are going to be picking late in the first round. And I don't think they're going to take a quarterback in the first round, even if they do. So that's just my opinion as of this moment. Unless Fields has a shit burger the rest of the season, which I don't see that happening.
No. And, you know, I know one of our own, Jordan Silvera, is a big JJ McCarthy supporter and would like to see the Bears go that way. But I see JJ McCarthy has Mac Jones written all over him. That's what I see when I've watched him play. I just see a lot of Mac Jones in another one of those scenarios. I could be wrong. Like I'm not any professional evaluator. That I just get a vibe that he's very similar as far as that goes. But we got one more question here. Let's answer this, and then we'll get out of here for the weekend. MC Fact or Mick Fact, I'm not sure how he says it, but he says, I'm scared. What if the Bears start winning and they decide to keep Getsy? No,
I don't think they're keeping Getsy regardless.
Scenario. I don't think.
In my opinion, I was just going to say, I don't think it matters what happens because, as I said in the past, this offense has had a tendency to play well in spite of his play calling. So if that's the case, you know, I don't see a scenario where he's going to be back. I just think they're going to have no choice but to move in a different direction. No matter who stays, it matter if it's Justin or a new quarterback, they're going to want to move on. It just it hasn't worked with him for whatever reason, for several different reasons. I mean, it starts out, somebody made a point. I can't remember who it was. Like his first 15 scripted plays every game looked pretty good. And then as he gets into like these chess matches with these defensive coordinators, he struggles his ass off, and he does. And, the problem is you can't, I don't think you can tie your future of your offense to a guy like that. It's time to start fresh, regardless of how you finish the season off.
Well,
that being said,
go
ahead, Tim,
really quick, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I would, now I lost my train of thought. I was just going to say that, regardless, they have played well, I shouldn't say played well. The offense has had some success in spite of Luke Getsy. And anybody that has a semblance of knowledge about football can see that. They can see that Getsy is an issue, and that the offense, and Justin Fields in particular, is still figuring out a way to have some success even in spite of what he's doing. But I'll let you answer this first. We have one more question we'll take. Do you guys think drafting a quarterback will upset the locker room chemistry? I do. The players seem to really respect Fields.
I do, and let me tell you why. I was going to say something about this earlier. I'm glad you asked this question, McFag, because I wanted to mention this earlier. So DJ Moore had an interview. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but he mentioned it like the players want him there. They want Fields there. He said, I've had my best season of my career. I've had a really good season. I don't know if he said that, but he said, I've had a really good season this year with Justin.
Wouldn't even entertain the idea.
He wants him back. And I think the rest of the locker room wants him back. If you guys have seen like the clips that the Bears team, like their media team posts, like after the games and stuff, especially in this last one, where they all love him. They all want him back. That his teammates love him. And I do think, especially at first, if the first time the decision was made that Fields was going to be moved on from, whether it be a trade or whether it be a quarterback being drafted while Fields is still there, whatever the case may be, early quarterback, I should say, I think it would upset the locker room. And I think they would not be on board with it. And that could change over time. But I do think that he is their guy in their mind, and they want to see what he can do as this roster continues to grow.
Yeah. So I agree too. I think that it would really, like you said, the players really love Justin. His teammates love him, and you can see it. There's a reason he's a captain. There was a reason he was a captain last year. These guys really love Justin, and you can see it. And to me, it's like it would be like, if your sister is dating a guy and they've been together for a long time and you really fall in love with the guy like a brother to you, it's sad whenever, that they break up and they're not together anymore. It's same concept to me. And, sometimes family members would prefer the in-law than they would the actual brother or sister. So to me, it's kind of the same concept here. Like if they lose Justin Fields, his teammates, I think there is going to be a little bit of there's definitely going to be a sour taste and a lot of it probably towards Ryan Poles. But it could also create the division in the team. Similar thing here. So yes, I also agree that I think letting Justin Fields go is going to be more harm than good, especially with his teammates. But
so
yes,
let's get out of here. But yeah, like I said, I appreciate you guys being here. I mean, we had a great show today. We covered a lot of different topics. The guest today was great. I'm sure you guys enjoyed that. So again, guys, thanks for joining us as always. Please like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel at Barroom Network. Give us a follow on Twitter. I'm at JAW0235, like Jaw, JAW0235. Tim is at Tim Willis 24. Make sure you check out his profile picture. He has a nice 5 head like Peyton Manning. It's a brand new profile picture. I mean, it's a big one, guys. You're going to get a kick out of this one. So get on there. Check us out. Check out Tim's 5 head. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Peace out, Bears fans.